"We need to discuss immediate restructuring," Courtney declared, her voice cutting through the air like ice. I stood in her pristine office doorway, watching as she didn't even lift her eyes from her laptop screen. 5 days. 5 days until my retirement party that the whole team had been planning for months. 35 years at Brackenridge Logistics, and this is how it would end. My name is Cynthia Ward, and at 64 years old, I thought I'd seen everything this company could throw at me. I started here in 1990 as a part-time inventory clerk in Salt Lake City, working evenings while my kids were small. Back then, our warehouse was half the size it is now, and old Mr. Brackenridge himself would walk the floors every morning, greeting each employee by name. Those days felt like a lifetime ago as I stared at this woman who had been here exactly 3 months. "Please sit down," Courtney continued, finally glancing up with those cold gray eyes that had intimidated so many of my colleagues over the past few weeks. She was 32, fresh from some corporate consulting firm, and had been systematically evaluating efficiency since her arrival. I'd watched her dismiss veteran employees with the same emotional detachment she might use to delete an email. I settled into the uncomfortable chair across from her glass desk, my hands folded in my lap. After 3.5 decades of navigating corporate politics, I knew when a conversation was heading somewhere dark. The signs were all there: the closed door, her rigid posture, the way she avoided eye contact while shuffling through what looked like termination paperwork. "Cynthia, I'll be direct," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Your position as head of operations is being eliminated, effective immediately. We've decided the department needs a complete overhaul, and that means starting fresh with new leadership." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I kept my expression neutral. 35 years of experience had taught me never to show weakness in moments like these. I thought about the retirement party scheduled for Friday afternoon, about the colleagues who had spent weeks organizing speeches and ordering my favorite chocolate cake from the bakery downtown. I thought about the beautiful watch they'd pooled their money to buy, still wrapped and sitting in Scott's desk drawer. "I see," I said simply, my voice steady despite the betrayal burning in my chest. Courtney seemed surprised by my calm response. Perhaps she'd expected tears or arguments. "Human Resources will handle your transition. We appreciate your years of service, of course." Years of service, as if 35 years of dedication, of staying late when shipments ran behind, of training countless employees who'd gone on to successful careers, could be summarized in such a dismissive phrase. Something cold settled in my chest as I realized this wasn't just about me. I'd built my life around this place, watching it evolve from a small family business into the regional powerhouse it had become. When Mr. Brackenridge sold to the first corporate buyer in 2003, I stayed. When they sold again in 2010 and again in 2018, I remained the constant thread holding the operations together. Each new ownership brought promises of respecting company culture and valuing experienced employees, but I'd learned to judge them by their actions, not their words. My rise through the ranks hadn't been easy. Starting as a part-time clerk meant proving myself twice as hard as the full-time hires. I'd earned my operations role by staying late, learning every system, and becoming the person everyone turned to when problems arose. Over the years, I'd trained dozens of employees, many of whom still called me for advice even after moving to other companies. Scott Henderson had been one of my first major successes. He'd started as an intern, unsure and overwhelmed by the complexity of logistics planning. I'd taken him under my wing, teaching him how to read shipping patterns, manage vendor relationships, and think 3 steps ahead of potential problems. Now, as our lead planner, he handled some of our biggest accounts with confidence. I'd helped nurture Meena Patel, who had been another project close to my heart. She'd joined our payroll department 12 years ago as a recent college graduate, intimidated by the veteran staff who'd been there since the company's early days. I'd encouraged her through her first major audit, supported her when she proposed switching to new software, and celebrated when she was promoted to lead payroll coordinator. She'd become like a daughter to me, often staying after work to chat about her family and seek advice about her career. There was also Jackson Torres, our warehouse supervisor, who'd started as a temporary holiday worker and impressed everyone with his work ethic. I'd recommended him for permanent hire and later supported his promotion when the previous supervisor retired. Elena Rodriguez, our newest customer service representative, had been struggling with difficult clients until I shared some of the techniques I'd learned over the years. These weren't just employees to me. They were people I'd invested in, relationships I'd nurtured, professionals I'd helped shape. The thought of leaving them under Courtney's cold management style made my heart ache. I'd seen how she treated people like replaceable assets rather than human beings with families, dreams, and decades of accumulated knowledge. As I sat in that sterile office, listening to Courtney explain the transition process, I realized she had no idea what she was about to lose. She saw my termination as a simple cost-cutting measure, a way to bring in cheaper, younger leadership. What she couldn't comprehend was the intricate web of relationships, institutional knowledge, and team loyalty that would walk out the door with me. But perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen for her to understand the true cost of her decision. The team will be informed this afternoon, Courtney continued, her fingers dancing across her keyboard as if my termination was just another task to check off her daily list. We'll be posting the head of operations position externally, looking for fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to departmental management. Fresh perspectives. The phrase made my jaw clench, as if 35 years of successfully managing operations, maintaining client relationships, and building a cohesive team meant nothing compared to whatever buzzword-filled approach she planned to implement. Will there be any transition period? I asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear her say it. We feel a clean break will be most efficient, she replied without looking up. The new leadership team will want to establish their own processes without being influenced by previous methodologies. She was talking about the systems I'd spent years perfecting, the vendor relationships I'd carefully cultivated, the staff training programs I'd developed that had earned recognition from our corporate headquarters. All of it dismissed as outdated simply because it came from someone she viewed as expendable. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 64 years in my lower back, but refusing to let it show. I understand. Should I collect my personal items now? For the first time during our conversation, Courtney looked genuinely uncomfortable. Human resources will coordinate that. We prefer to handle transitions discreetly to minimize disruption. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was about to create the biggest disruption this department had seen in decades, but she was worried about the optics of an employee packing a box. I nodded once, professionally, and turned toward the door. Cynthia, she called as I reached for the handle. This isn't personal. It's just business. I paused, my hand on the cold metal, and turned back to face her. For 35 years, I'd bitten my tongue in moments like these, swallowed my pride, and maintained my professionalism, even when it cost me personally. But something about this moment, perhaps the finality of it, or maybe the sheer callousness of her dismissal, loosened something inside me. You're absolutely right, Courtney, I said, my voice steady and calm. It isn't personal. You don't know me well enough for it to be personal. You don't know any of us well enough. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I walked out of her office, through the main floor where my team was busy with afternoon tasks, and straight to human resources. As I passed Scott's desk, he looked up with a concerned expression, clearly reading something in my face that I couldn't quite hide. I gave him a small smile and kept walking, already knowing that this wouldn't end the way Courtney expected. The human resources meeting was a blur of paperwork and corporate speak. Janet Mills, who had been with the company almost as long as I had, looked genuinely pained as she walked me through the termination process. Her hands shook slightly as she slid the final documents across the conference table. Cynthia, I want you to know this directive came from above, she whispered, glancing toward the closed door. I fought against it. We all did. But Courtney has complete authority over operations restructuring. I signed the papers mechanically, my mind already moving beyond this sterile room to the real consequences of what was happening. I know, Janet. You've always been fair to everyone here. Your benefits package includes the full retirement compensation we discussed last month, she continued, her voice gaining strength. That hasn't changed. And if you need a reference for anything. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Janet was good people, caught in an impossible situation. How are you planning to handle the announcement? I asked. Her face darkened. Courtney wants to address the operations team at 4 p.m. She's calling it a strategic realignment meeting. Strategic realignment, more corporate euphemisms to mask the human cost of her decisions. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 3:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, she'd be telling my team that their leader of 7 years was gone, effective immediately. No transition, no explanation beyond budget constraints, no acknowledgement of what we'd built together. Will the team have a chance to ask questions? I asked. Janet's expression told me everything I needed to know. She wants to keep it brief and professional. I nodded and stood, extending my hand to shake hers. Take care of yourself, Janet. And take care of them as much as you can. As I walked toward the exit, I passed the operations floor one last time. Scott was at his desk, deep in conversation with Mina about a client delivery schedule. Jackson was coordinating with the warehouse team about tomorrow's incoming shipments. Elena was on the phone with a customer, using the patient tone I'd coached her to adopt with difficult accounts. They had no idea their world was about to change. I thought about stopping, about giving them some kind of warning, but that would only make things harder for everyone. Better to let Courtney deliver her news and deal with the consequences herself. Still, as I pushed through the front doors into the crisp October air, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from my daughter. So excited for Friday. Did you remind everyone about Mom's favorite flowers for the decorations? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, change of plans. I'll call you tonight. The drive home felt surreal. After 35 years of leaving this parking lot knowing I'd be back tomorrow, this time felt different. Final. I'd always imagined my last day would involve handshakes and hugs, maybe a few tears, definitely that chocolate cake Scott had been secretly planning. Instead, I was driving away with a box of personal items I hadn't even been allowed to pack myself. But as I pulled into my driveway, something unexpected settled over me. Not sadness or anger, those would come later, but a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in decades, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, and maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. My phone rang as I was unlocking my front door. The caller ID showed Scott's name. Cynthia. His voice was tight with emotion. What the hell just happened? I set my box down on the kitchen counter and took a deep breath before answering. She terminated my position, Scott. Effective immediately. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely controlled. 5 days before your retirement party. 5 days. I know this is insane. You've carried this department for years. Half our clients ask for you specifically. Our efficiency ratings are the highest they've been since. He stopped himself, probably realizing that logic had nothing to do with Courtney's decision. How did the team take the news? I asked, though I could already guess from the pain in his voice. She hasn't told us yet. The meeting's in 20 minutes, but Janet let it slip to Mina, and words spreading fast. His voice dropped to a whisper. People are furious, Cynthia. I've never seen anything like it. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. My team was tight-knit, forged by years of working together through challenges and celebrating successes. They'd planned this retirement party not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Many of them considered me a mentor, a friend, sometimes even a mother figure. Scott, I need you to listen to me carefully, I said, settling into my kitchen chair. Whatever happens in that meeting, don't do anything rash. Don't let emotion override your judgment. Don't do anything rash? His voice rose. Cynthia, they just threw away 35 years of your life like it meant nothing. How are we supposed to just sit there and take that? Because you have families to support, careers to protect, and futures to consider, I replied firmly. Don't let my situation jeopardize yours. But even as I said the words, I knew they wouldn't listen. These weren't just employees following corporate directives. They were people who understood loyalty, who valued relationships over profit margins. Courtney was about to discover what happened when you underestimated those bonds. I have to go, Scott said. The meeting's starting. But, Cynthia, this isn't over." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the quiet of my empty house. I made a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the backyard where fall leaves were beginning their annual dance to the ground. For the first time in decades, I had nowhere I needed to be, no deadlines to meet, no fires to put out. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina. "This is wrong. So wrong." Then another from Jackson. "We won't forget what you've done for us." Elena sent, "Thank you for everything you taught me." One by one, messages poured in from colleagues, support staff, even people from other departments who'd heard the news. Each one was a small validation that my 35 years had mattered, that the relationships I'd built were real and lasting. But it was the silence that followed that told me the most. No angry texts, no heated phone calls, no dramatic pronouncements, just quiet. And I knew from experience that quiet was often more dangerous than noise. At 4:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was Janet from Human Resources, and her voice was strained. "Cynthia, we have a situation. I need to ask, did you say anything to the operations team about your termination?" "No," I replied honestly. "I followed protocol completely. Because we have 5 resignation letters on my desk right now, and people are still coming." I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. "How many is still coming, Janet?" Her answer made my coffee cup pause halfway to my lips. 12 resignation letters as of 5 minutes ago." Janet's voice cracked slightly, "and there are more people lined up outside my office." I set my coffee down carefully, processing the magnitude of what was happening. 12 people, that was nearly the entire operations team, plus several support staff who worked closely with our department. In one afternoon, Courtney had managed to trigger the largest mass resignation in company history. "Who started it?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Scott handed in his badge the moment Courtney finished explaining your termination. He said, and I quote, 'If Cynthia's gone, I'm done.'" Janet paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Then Mina followed immediately after. "She told Courtney that this company doesn't deserve you." After that, it was like a dam burst. I pictured the scene: Scott's steady leadership, Mina's fierce loyalty, the ripple effect spreading through a team that had worked together like family. They were making an enormous sacrifice, giving up job security and steady paychecks to make a statement about what my dismissal meant to them. "Janet, these are good people with families and responsibilities," I said, feeling the weight of their loyalty. "Is there any chance management will reconsider?" Honestly, I don't think Courtney understands what's happening yet. She's holed up in her office, making phone calls to corporate, trying to figure out how to handle operations with no operations team. Janet's voice dropped to a whisper. "Between you and me, she's panicking." As she should be. The operations department was the backbone of Bracken Ridge Logistics. We coordinated every shipment, managed every client relationship, and ensured every deadline was met. Without experienced staff who understood our systems and relationships, the company would be flying blind within days. "What about the warehouse?" I asked. "Jackson submitted his letter an hour ago. Half his team followed within minutes." Janet sighed heavily. "Cynthia, I've been in human resources for 18 years, and I've never seen anything like this. People aren't just quitting jobs, they're walking away from careers, from pension contributions, from everything. For you." The magnitude of their sacrifice hit me like a physical blow. These weren't impulsive decisions made in the heat of emotion. Jackson had been 3 years away from his own retirement, with a full pension waiting. Mina had just bought a house and was supporting her elderly parents. Scott had been planning to propose to his girlfriend and had been saving for a wedding. "Are they getting severance packages?" I asked. "Standard 2 weeks for voluntary resignation, nothing like what you're getting for your years of service." Janet paused again. "Cynthia, I have to ask, did you plan this somehow?" "No," I replied truthfully. I had no idea they would do this. And I hadn't. But as I sat in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the 35 years of memories and relationships I'd built, I realized I should have seen it coming. These people weren't just my colleagues, they were my legacy. I'd trained them, mentored them, fought for their promotions and raises, covered for them when life got complicated, and celebrated their successes as if they were my own children. Courtney had made a fatal calculation error. She'd seen my termination as removing one expensive employee. She hadn't considered that she'd be losing the institutional knowledge, client relationships, and team cohesion that had taken decades to build. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Scott. Turning in my badge felt amazing. No regrets. Then Mina. First time I felt proud to work here in months. Jackson. My crew and I are going for drinks. You should join us. As I read their messages, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about my termination anymore. This was about respect, loyalty, and the value of human relationships in a corporate world that had forgotten those things mattered. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the true scope of the disaster was becoming clear. I sat in my kitchen, still in my robe, watching the drama unfold through a steady stream of text messages and phone calls from colleagues who'd stayed behind. You need to see this, Elena texted, followed by a photo of the warehouse. Empty loading bays stretched across the frame, with trucks sitting idle in the yard. No one to coordinate shipments, no one to manage inventory, no one to ensure the complex dance of logistics that kept the company running. My phone rang. Janet again, her voice tight with stress. Cynthia, we're in crisis mode. Courtney's been on calls with corporate since 6 a.m. 3 major clients have already called, asking why their shipments are delayed. She paused, and I could hear phones ringing in the background. We need help. Would you consider coming in as a consultant, even just for a few days, to help transition? Janet, I interrupted gently, you know I can't do that. I know. It's just, she paused. 18 resignation letters now. The customer service phones are ringing nonstop, and we have no one who understands the client protocols you developed. The new intern we hired last week is literally crying at her desk because she doesn't know how to handle a shipping dispute. I closed my eyes, picturing the chaos. Every system, every process, every relationship I'd carefully built over 3 decades was crumbling in real time. Part of me felt sick about the impact on innocent employees and long-standing clients, but another part, a part one wasn't entirely proud of, felt vindicated. What's Courtney saying about all this? I asked. That's the thing, Janet's voice dropped to a whisper. She's trying to blame it on you, telling corporate that you must have orchestrated this somehow, that you've created a toxic culture of dependence instead of building independent systems. I almost laughed. Even facing complete operational collapse, Courtney couldn't admit that her decision had been wrong. Instead, she was doubling down, painting my leadership style as some kind of manipulation rather than the mentorship and team building it had actually been. How's corporate responding to that theory? I asked. Well, they're asking some pointed questions about how an effective leader could be replaced so easily if the systems were properly documented and the team was properly cross-trained. The second day brought even more dramatic developments. I woke to find my email inbox flooded with messages from clients, vendors, and industry contacts who'd heard about the mass resignation. Word was spreading through the Salt Lake City logistics community like wildfire. Brackenridge lost Cynthia Ward and their entire operations team in one day, read a post in our industry Facebook group that Scott had screenshot and sent to me. Anyone know what happened? The responses were telling. Client after client shared stories about working with me over the years, about problems I'd solved and relationships I'd maintained. Vendors talked about the trust they'd built with our team, trust that now felt uncertain with an entirely inexperienced crew trying to manage their accounts. But it was the call from Tom Bradley, our biggest client, that really drove home the impact. Tom's company had been shipping through Brackenridge for 15 years, and I'd personally handled their account for the last 8. Cynthia, what the hell is going on over there? His voice was frustrated and confused. I called this morning about our Friday shipment, and some kid who didn't even know our account terms tried to charge me standard rates instead of our negotiated pricing. When I asked to speak to someone in charge, they put me on hold for 20 minutes and then transferred me to someone who'd never heard of our company. I explained the situation as diplomatically as I could, but Tom's response was swift and decisive. Well, that settles it. We're moving our business. You know any good logistics companies looking for a reliable client? I did, of course. After 35 years in the industry, I knew every reputable company in the region. By the end of that phone call, Tom had the contact information for 3 competitors, all of whom would welcome his substantial shipping volume. Tom wasn't the only one. Throughout the day, I fielded similar calls from other long-term clients, all expressing frustration with the sudden loss of service quality and institutional knowledge. Each conversation ended the same way, with them asking for recommendations for other logistics providers. By evening, word reached me through industry contacts that Brackenridge had lost 4 major accounts in 2 days. The financial impact was already substantial, but the reputational damage would be even more costly in the long term. As I reflected on the unfolding chaos, I realized that my years of relationship building had created something Courtney couldn't have anticipated, a network of loyalty that extended far beyond the company walls. The clients weren't just loyal to Brackenridge Logistics, they were loyal to the people who had served them well, people who were no longer there. Looking back on this whirlwind of consequences, I understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. It's simply allowing people to experience the full weight of their own poor decisions, surrounded by a community that values relationships over corporate efficiency and loyalty over bottom-line thinking.